Hi, I'm Shashwat. I hope you're all having a really great day. In this episode, I'll walk you through each step on how to create and animate a logo and do motion graphics for a professional documentary. A few months back, I shot a documentary for an institution, where I also had to design and animate the logo. Since it was a very old institution, they did not have a digital logo, or even a vector drawing in Illustrator or CorelDRAW. Basically, it was just a hand-drawn logo, and all I had was just a scanned copy of the photograph. So I had to make everything from scratch in Fusion. To watch the documentary, you can click on the link above. But before we begin, let's familiarize ourselves with some of the tools that I will be repeatedly using. So the nodes that I shall be using quite often to create the logo are Polygon, sBSpline, Boolean, and Outline. The Polygon node is similar to Bezier curve. With this, we can create more organic looking curves. The sBSpline node creates a more smoother looking curve with minimal points. The Boolean node can intersect, combine, or subtract shapes. And if we change the style mode to keep, it allows us to keep the original colors of the shapes. The outline node does what its name implies. It creates an outline. We can adjust its thickness, its length, or its position. To follow along, this tutorial requires some familiarity with Fusion. Now let's start creating the logo. Load the image in Fusion. We are going to create the logo using shapes. There are some very simple shapes in this logo. There's a triangle, a star, circles with a wheel in between, some text and some curves, and a lamp. So let's begin. We'll start by creating two triangles and a star. To create these, go to Effects, then Shapes, and load a Polygon node as well as a Render node. Connect the Polygon node to the Render node and then load the Render node into the scene. Next, we connect the Render node to the reference image using a Merge node. Here the resolution of the render image is 1920 by 1080, and as you can see, the original image has a resolution of 2010 by 2010. In the Render node, change the image resolution from 1080p to 2010 by 2010. Now let's draw the shape. The first point we set is the starting point, and the next point that we set sets the direction the shape will move in when we animate it. In the inspector window, we uncheck the solid and we adjust the border width to increase the thickness of the line. Next, change the color to black. Let's duplicate this polygon and in the inspector window, rotate it 60 degrees in the Z rotation and adjust the points to fit the reference image. Next, we add a merge node and connect these two polygon nodes together. To create the star, we duplicate these two polygon nodes and in both the inspector window, we check mark the solid to fill the shape. Next, we merge the polygons using the Boolean node. And in the inspector window, we change the operation type to union. We connect the Boolean node to an outline node and connect the outline node to the merge node. We add a transformation node between the outline and the merge node. What we want is to scale the star into position. So in the transformation node, we first connect the Y size to the X size using the expression. Then we increase the X size slightly to position our star accordingly. Then in the outline node, adjust the thickness to match the thickness of the triangle. Now, as you can see, we have two different colors. And we will be adding more shapes, and instead of going again and again and changing each color, we can add Change Style node, which sets the color for all of the shapes that come before it in the node tree. So with this, the star shape of our logo is ready. Next, we'll create a circle and use the Boolean node to subtract shapes from it. Now to create the circle, let's load an ellipse node and scale it to place. Then connect it to the rest of the shapes using a Boolean node. In the Boolean settings, we will change the operation type from intersection to union. Now to mask the circle, we will add another Boolean node and connect this Boolean node to that one. And change the operation type to subtract. When we zoom in, we can see that it's still not how it's supposed to be. So to correct it, we will duplicate the transformation node and connect it between the two Boolean nodes. Perfect. Now the mask sits in the right place. To fill the inner area, we will connect the circle to another Boolean node. And to make the mask, we'll add another Boolean node and connect these two polygon nodes to it. Now connect the masked Boolean to the new circle Boolean to get a hexagonal shape. Now we will merge this hexagonal shape with this outer circle shape. Now to merge this hexagonal shape, we'll connect this Boolean node to another Boolean node and change the operation type to union. Next, we'll create a mask to subtract a circular shape from this hexagonal shape. To do that, we duplicate the ellipse node and connect it to the rest of the shapes using a Boolean node and change the operation type to subtract. Now we scale and position the mask into place. Now we'll work on the wheel. So, what we are going to do in this segment is that first we'll create the foreground spoke and the background spoke and the circumference of the wheel. Then we'll merge them all together using a Boolean node. So first, let's make some space. To create the spokes, we'll first load a rectangle node. Connect it to the rest of the shapes using a merge node. Now let's scale and position it into place. Now let's add an n-gon node. Connect it to the rectangle node using a Boolean node and change the operation type to union. In the n-gon node, we'll change the sides to 20 and scale and position it into place as well. Now we want 3 of these circular shapes. So we will use a duplicate node and change the copies to 2. Then we will adjust the Y offset to position them into place. Now let's add a change style node to change the color of the shape to blue. To make the outline of the shape, I'll add an outline node and connect the Boolean node to it. Now we'll add a Boolean node and connect the change style node and the outline node to it, and then connect it to the merge node. We'll change the style mode to keep and the operation type to union. Now in the outline mode, adjust the thickness to the desired value. To connect the 3 circles to the outline, duplicate the outline node and connect the duplicate node to it, and then connect this node to another Boolean node just after the main outline node and change the operation type to union. We can see that there is some overlapping, so we will go to the duplicate node and adjust the Y offset value. To change the color of the outline, add another change style node and change the color to black. Now that our spoke is ready, we will create the rest using the duplicate node. Now in the duplicate node settings, change the number of copies to 11 and the Z rotation to -30. Now we need to adjust the pivot. So first change the axis mode to absolute and then adjust the X and Y pivot so that the spokes are aligned. With this, our foreground spokes are done. Now let's tackle the background spokes. I'll duplicate some of these nodes and then connect them in their proper order. Now let's add another Boolean node and connect these 2 duplicate nodes together. Connect the spoke Boolean to the merge Boolean of the background spoke. To change the color of the background spoke, I'll add another change style node and change its color to a darker blue. Now we'll merge the background and the foreground spokes. So select this Boolean node and change the style mode to keep and operation to union. Now select this background spoke Boolean node, press Ctrl T to flip the connections to bring our outline to the front. Now to rotate these spokes, I'll add a transform node. Then I'll copy and paste the pivot values from the duplicate node and rotate it 15 degrees. Here we can see that the position of the foreground and the background spokes are reversed. To correct that, select the final Boolean node and press Ctrl T to flip the connections. So with this, our spokes are done. Now we'll start working on the wheel. Here I'll create the rest of the wheel, including the 2 inner circles, and then combine it with the spokes and merge it with the rest of the composition. First, we'll duplicate this ellipse node. Now add a Boolean node and change the operation type to union. Then connect the ellipse node to the Boolean node. Load the reference image to align the ellipse. Now duplicate the ellipse node and connect these two using a Boolean node and change the operation type to subtract. Now I will scale down the second Boolean node to get the wheel shape. Now we'll create the outline of the wheel. So add another Boolean node and an outline node. Connect this Boolean node to the outline node and connect the outline node to this Boolean node and change the operation type to union and style mode to keep. Now in this Boolean node, change the color to blue. And in this last Boolean node, change style mode to keep. To change the outline color, I add a change style node after the outline node and change the color to black. And finally in the outline node, I'll adjust the thickness. To make the inner circle, I duplicate the Boolean node, the ellipse node and the change style node and change the color to blue. Now I'll duplicate the outline node and connect it to the change style node. Then I'll duplicate another Boolean node and connect the ellipse and the change style node to it and connect the Boolean node to the final Boolean node. Going back to the ellipse node, I'll change the color to blue. Then using the background image as a reference, I'll scale down the ellipse. And going back to the change style color, I'll change the color to black. Finally, I adjust the thickness in the outline node. To make the inner circle, duplicate these 4 nodes and connect them to a duplicated Boolean node. Scale down the ellipse tool and in the style, change the color to a lighter shade of blue. Next, we'll make the 2 lines on the either side of the wheel. For this, load a sBSpline node and connect it to the merge node. After selecting the sBSpline node, in the viewer window, click to place a point at the start of the line. Then add another point at the end of the line. Then add 2 more points in the middle and drag it to get a curved shape. Now add another sBSpline node, then repeat the process for the other side. Now adjust the border width and change the style color to black. Now repeat the process for the other sBSpline. With this, our wheel is ready. Now we'll start working on the text. Now let's drag and drop the text node and connect it with the rest of the composition using a new merge node. In the inspector window of the text node, type your text and select a font to your liking. I am using this font for this scene. Then change the color to black and place it in position. You can adjust the transform parameters to your liking. Then duplicate this node and repeat the process. Next, we'll work on the inner text. So add another text node. I'll change the font type in my text node. Then I'll type my text and then change the color to black. And in the layout section, I will change the type to circle. With this, I can type a text around a circle. Now let's adjust some parameters in the layout section. I'll reduce the width and the size to position my text in place. Then in the transform section, I'll adjust the spacing. And back in the layout section, I'll rotate in Z-axis to set the text into position. Now I'll duplicate the node and repeat the process. Now duplicate the text one last time. I'll type the text. And this time in the layout section, instead of circles, I will be using path. Now click and drag to create a point. Then click and drag 2 more times to create a path. Here I will adjust the placement and the scale of the text in the layout and the transform menu. And with this, our text is done. Now we'll start working on the lamp. I drag and drop a polygon node and connect it to the rest of the composition using a new merge node. Now I start drawing the shape. I'm using multiple polygon nodes as it's easier to control small shapes rather than one large shape. For example, here I am creating one side of the handle and all I have to do is duplicate it and flip it to the other side to maintain the symmetry. Once all of my polygon shapes are ready, I'll connect all of these nodes to each other using a Boolean node with the operation type set to union. Finally, I'll add 2 more Boolean nodes whose operation type is set to subtract. And I'll connect 2 polygon nodes and use them to subtract from the shapes. And lastly, I add a change style node to change the color to black. Now it's time to animate the logo. We'll start by animating the triangle and the star. Select the first triangle polygon node, go to the first frame, and in the polygon inspector window, change the length to 0 and add a keyframe. Then at frame 62, change the length to 1. Now we have the first animation and we shall repeat the process with the other triangle and the star. For the star, I will animate the outline node. Now we shall animate the wheel. Select the transform node for the wheel, then set the frame number to -25 and add a keyframe to the rotation. Then go to frame number 74 and add another keyframe. Now go back to -25 and change the rotation to 360. Now as we scrub through the timeline, we can see the wheel rotating. The reason why I set the first frame of the rotation as -25 is so that I can have a much smoother rotation. Next, I'll animate the scale of the wheel. At frame 0, the scale is 0, and at frame 36, the scale is 1. Now we'll animate the 2 lines on the either side of the wheel. Our first frame will be frame number 37. But before we do that, for a better visibility, switch off the show controls. Now in the inspector window of one of the sBSpline nodes, add a keyframe to position and set it to 1. Then at frame 81, set the position to 0. Now we'll repeat the process with the other sBSpline node, but here instead of position, we'll be animating the length. Now we'll animate the inner text. The first thing that we do is to go to each text and change the write on value to 0. Now go back to the first text and at frame number 57 add a keyframe to write on. Then go forward 4 frames and change the write on end to full. Now we'll repeat the process for the other text, but each will be starting from the last frame of the previous text. The same is for the next 2 texts, but I'll give a space of 5 frames instead of 4. Now for the last text in this group, I will go to shading and animate the alpha instead, starting from frame number 75 and ending at frame number 80 to fade it into the animation. Next, we will animate the black circle. We select the ellipse node and go to frame number 75. In the inspector editor, add a keyframe to width and height. Then at frame number 54, reduce the width and height to 0. And this is what our animation looks like up till now. We will now animate the outer text and follow the same technique that we used for the previous text animations. We will start from frame number 80 and move forward 4 frames each time. Next, we'll animate the lamp. First, we'll set the pivot point. So select the transform node in the lamps group. Now to see the pivot point, switch on the show controls. Then in the transform node, drag the Y pivot down up until the bottom edge of the lamp. Now we can switch off the show controls. Go to frame number 75 and put a keyframe to X and Y size in the transform node and make sure the size is 0. Then go to frame number 85 and change the size to 1. Now we'll animate the in-between. So first go to frame number 82 and here we will bring the X size slightly down and increase the Y size slightly above 1. Next, at frame number 79, bring X and Y size slightly down. This is what our lamp animation looks like. Next, we'll add the flame. So let's make some space. Now drag and drop a background node as well as a paint node. Change the image settings in the background node to 2010 by 2010. Connect the background node to the paint node. Next, connect the paint node to the composition using a merge node after the sRender node. first select the Paint node, then from the Tools panel select the Multi-Paint Brush tool. We'll first set our frame cursor at frame number 85. Then we are going to do some changes in the brush settings. In the tablet settings, change the vary size to pressure and color to black. We'll leave the stroke duration as it is. Now we need to see where our flame is positioned, so we'll bring back the reference image. Click on Show Controls to show your brush and then adjust the brush size and start painting. We will animate the flame growing at each frame up until frame number 92. For the rest of the flame animation, let's add another paint node and connect the background node to this paint node, then merge it into the scene. In this paint node, most of our brush settings is the same as the previous one, but we will change the stroke duration. I have chosen the stroke duration to be 500, but you can just as well change it depending on the length of your animation. Now at frame number 93, we will draw the full flame with the illuminating lines. What stroke duration does is that it sets the visibility duration of each stroke. Now let's add some color to this flame. We'll bring in another paint node and connect it just after the sRender node and connect it to the same background. We'll change the color to a more orangish reddish color. Now let's start painting the flame. And we'll continue to paint until we reach the last frame. Now let's have a look. Let's make some more space. So what we are going to do now is to create a glow effect. So let's add a background node. We'll change the image size to 2010 by 2010 and connect it to the composition using the merge node. Just after the sRender node, we'll change its color to orangish red and then we'll attach an ellipse mask node to the background and position it right on top of the flame. We'll animate the soft edge and the border width as well as the center and the scale. We'll add a keyframe at frame number 92. This will be our final position. Then we'll go to frame number 85 and adjust the mask as well as the border width and the soft edge. Maybe at frame number 90 we'll bring the scale down slightly as well as adjust the border width. Next we'll add a keyframe at frame number 85 at full value and at frame number 84 we'll change the level to 0. Lastly, we can adjust the flame glow using blend in the merge node. And this is what our animation looks like up till now. Now we'll work on the particle simulation. So first you copy and paste all of these nodes in a new composition. We'll be creating a 100 frame animation so that we can get a much smoother particle simulation. Then we'll save this file as pline, short for particle line. Next we'll add a sRender node and change the image resolution to 2010 by 2010. Now from this node group, I don't need any of the ellipse nodes, so I'll delete all of the ellipse nodes and the other nodes that's connected to them. So all I'm left with is the star and the two triangles. Now in the change style node, I can change the color from black to somewhere around reddish orange. Remove the animation from all of these nodes, for we will be creating a new animation. Now let's create our animation. We select this polygon node first, and in the inspector window we will first set the length of the polygon as well as the border width. Now go to the first frame and add a keyframe to the position and change it to 0. Then go to frame number 100 and change the position to 1. Now with this our first animation is ready, and we will use the same steps on the other polygon as well as the outline for the star. Now let's bring in the particle emitter as well as the particle render node. In the particle render, we select the output node to 2D, and in the image section, we will change the image resolution to 2010 by 2010. Now we go to the particle emitter node and change the number to 500 and lifespan to 10. Then we go to style and change the style type to blob. Next we go to region and change the region type to bitmap. Now we'll connect the sRender node to the region input of the particle emitter. This means that our emitter node will be using the bitmap image as the particle emitter. So all of those 3 small lines that we have created, they will be emitting particles. Now let's change the color of the particles. We go to Style and change the color to reddish orange. Next, we'll change the size. We go to Size Control and we change the size to 0.5. And then we'll change the curve in the size over life area. So basically what we want is particles to start big, and by the time they end, they are so small that they basically vanish. Lastly, we'll adjust the fade control to give it a more seamless transition. So what happens now is that when we play the animation, we notice that our particles are not vanishing when the animation ends. To do that, we'll just add 10 more frames at the end of the animation, because that was the lifetime of the particles that we had set. And lastly, in the particle emitter, we will also animate the number of particles. So at frame number 100, we add a keyframe, and at frame number 101, we change the number to 0. Now let's go back to the particle render node. In the control panel, we'll give it a slight blur as well as a slight glow. And then we'll adjust the blur blend so that we can get some of those particles back. Now for the final touch-up, let's connect the sRender node to the particle render node using a merge. The reason why I have done this is that in the post I can add a soft glow node to the particles, but I want the brighter area to be the emitter. Now let's add a saver node, give it a name and set the desired location, then press save. Change the output format to PNG, press render and then press start render. This will render our particles. Now let's go back to the previous composition and load our particles. Now load the particles and connect it to the rest of the composition. Now we'll add the time speed node to adjust the duration of our particle animation. We'll change the speed to 1.632. Now if we press play, we can see our particles moving in sync. Now after the time speed node, let's add a soft glow node. And we'll adjust the threshold, gain and glow styles. And with this, our particle system is done as well as our logo. We can render it using a saver node. One of the most useful thing about this style of logo creation is that I can change the background color depending on the situation. We can make it completely transparent, or if we want a yellowish color or any other color, we can do so as well. But for this video, I'll keep it to white. Now we can render out our animation and use it in any video that we are working on.
राष्ट्रभाषा प्रचार समिति की स्थापना राष्ट्र को एकजुट करने का एक अभूतपूर्व प्रयास था.
So, that's all for today. Please do leave a feedback in the comment section below. It keeps us motivated. Until next time, see you.